podcast where we make adulting easier by making money easier. This is your host, Lauren. I'm joined today by Chris, who lives just north of the Twin Cities, Minneapolis, and St. Paul in Minnesota. Chris was divorced in 2015, and this helped him be more intentional about his personal finances, paying down debt, investing, and saving. He continues to work in enterprise technology while also investing in real estate. He started blogging about his finance journey over at Heavy Metal Money and has just started the Heavy Metal Money YouTube channel and podcast. Chris has a deep passion for music, entrepreneurship, and business, and has a newly formed nonprofit to help those experiencing financial hardship due to medical debt caused by premature birth. Thanks for joining me, Chris.
Hey Lauren, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. This is going to be a fun conversation.
I am looking forward to it too, but I do got to pay the bills real quick. So, this episode is brought to you by Steadily Landlord Insurance. Steadily covers many kinds of properties, even Airbnbs and VRBOs. So, if you rent property to others, please support this podcast by clicking the link in the show notes and getting a quote today. So, our goal for today, Chris, as always, is to make adulting easier for everybody by discussing a personal finance topic since managing money is a big part of adulting. Today, we're going to talk about the financial impacts of divorce. So, first, let me thank you for agreeing to come on and talk about what really is a pretty difficult topic.
Oh, you're welcome. I think we need to, I guess, be a little more open when we talk about not only just what it's like to go through divorce, but also the finance aspect of it too. And yeah, I'm happy to talk through my experience. Again, I am no means a lawyer. I am no means an expert in some of these matters, but I can share my experiences. And I just again hope that if somebody is either going through divorce, if it comes up later on in life and you happen to hear this one, just maybe I can help them just a little bit more.
Yep, absolutely. Yes, and I guess you can't really be an expert at getting divorced, but
That's right.
you can have gone through one. So we heard you got divorced in 2015. When did you get married?
Yeah, we got married. It was actually a long time ago now, but 1998. So it was a long time. We were very, very young. So, I was 24, she was 22, and so we were young and broke. So if you think about it, we were kind of like high school sweethearts, right? So we did our college and vocational training, moving from our part-time jobs into our full-time jobs after college and so it was basically everything from I think when we started dating, I mean I was making $4.25 an hour, right? So it's
Right.
pretty crazy when we when we bought my first new car when we were together. I was making $7 an hour. So we didn't really have anything when we first started dating.
So I was going to ask if you had prenups, but based on that, I would assume no.
Yeah, we didn't really, and again, we didn't really think, when you're that young too, it is hard to think in the future, right? It's hard to have that delayed gratification thing to think of the future. You are very much living for the now, and you're thinking, maybe a couple weeks out, maybe the next vacation you're going on or whatever it is, right? But it's yeah, so we never even thought about, well, what happens if this doesn't work out, you know?
Did finances contribute to the divorce?
Not at all. Not at all. I mean, we were pretty, again, pretty fortunate that we never really had any disagreements around money. Um, we, for the most part, were still somewhat frugal, but we were kind of, in the Dave Ramsey speak, normal, right? We had credit card debt. We had new cars. It was kind of that same thing. I really didn't think about retirement, and either did she. And so, but yeah, money really wasn't, I guess, an area of contention for us. Really, it was just, some people grow apart, I guess you could say, right? People continually go through changes, and that's kind of what led to the divorce between me and my wife. And again, we continued to co-parent really well. We maintained, we were cordial, and even though we were divorced, there's things that I helped put new brake pads on her car. And once she was on vacation, she saw some Iron Maiden stuff at the Hard Rock and had to send me a picture of it. Right. So, we still were friends, even though we just, it didn't really work out together. But we were married for a long time, 15 years. So,
That is a long time. So, once you knew you were going to get divorced, how long was it until you got divorced?
yeah. So it was really it. So my wife left in 2013, and so she left, and we tried to kind of work things through a little bit, come back for a little bit, but in the end, it really didn't work. We again, one thing that we did to really help with finances, and we talked about this, right, is really kind of um, sharing the house while she was preparing to move out, permanently. So she left at 2013. Um, to this day, I don't know where she went or who she was with, but she was gone for a few months. So I was like, Mr. Mom. I was like just hardcore, dad. But the interesting thing there too is that we, when we decided that this was going to be permanent and we were going to do this, I basically said, well, let's make sure that we can actually go through this and you can go through this. She was going to find an apartment. And so I basically lived downstairs and she lived upstairs. Obviously the kids were still here. The kids at the time, they were like, let's see, 13, 12, and 10, around that age, I think.
Ok.
And so, we were still a family unit, I guess you could say, right? I mean, we still ran the household, but we were roommates at that point. And that went on for, you know, several months. And then, she moved out, got her own place. Um, I mean, the kids were going back and forth. We were already kind of setting that up. Kids going back and forth between her place and my place. And then the divorce was actually final May of 2015. So we actually went probably a year and a half, maybe 2 years, where we were still legally married, but we were physically separated. Um, and I will mention too, it all depends on, again, what state you're in and what that process is like. I will tell you that, again, looking at finances, but also the process to getting divorced actually was super easy. um, I want to say actually almost too easy, in my opinion. I mean, the whole point of getting married is that, you know, it's supposed to be forever. No, but so basically, because we were doing it, there really wasn't. We were doing it amicably, right? There was no like serious contention, and she's gonna, we elected to do this again to save money. Um, there was no legal representation on either side. So we did this ourselves. That alone is huge. I mean, we saved thousands and thousands of dollars. I mean, originally I just did a one consultation before I knew where we're going to go. Like I met with an attorney, just saying, we are physically separated. We are going to get divorced. What are some things I need to know? Um, I paid a few $100s just for some guidance, and it really didn't help me at all. I mean, in all seriousness. Um, so then what we did is again, the state of Minnesota, where we're located, you could go to minnesota.judicial.com or .org, I can't remember, .com. Um, and there's actually a process where you can walk through it. Like literally it walks you through the process online, and there's like a couple options up front. Like, are we doing this uncontested? There's no legal representation. And then they ask, do you have kids or do you not have kids? And you just follow the process online. It is very in depth. There's a few calculators in there. They calculate um, any spousal support, typically what people refer to as alimony in the past. Spousal support is what they call it nowadays.
Hmm.
Spousal support. They also calculate any child support. And again, that child support too. There's a lot of things that go into it on both parties. So it's not just, well, let's look at how much you make. Let's look at how much your spouse makes. Um, you know, and I hear horror stories. I mean, I have friends that were paying, $800 a month in child support for one kid that he only saw on the weekends. I mean, and I'm not saying, I don't want to get into like any sort of gender role here or gender bias or anything, but to me, regardless, that's a lot of money, and it's hard for someone to kind of make not only just everything else that goes through divorce, but one, you're limited to how much you can see your child, and then plus you're paying $800. And yeah, anyway, that was just one example. So yeah, we followed that process through online, and then we did go back and forth a few times. That was kind of what took the longest, is that you input everything, every asset that you have. So any real estate, any retirement account, any, I mean, you name it. You could even get down. I mean, you actually go through some key physical property, right? I mean, literally
Mm.
dividing up who's getting the furniture. Um, I will say that once it was final and I was here, so I stayed in the family home that we had since 2002. And there was several months after she was gone where I didn't have a sofa, I didn't have a bed, I didn't have a dining room table. Um, there was a lot of things that yeah, I went without for a while because you know, in all seriousness too, some of that dividing up the assets, sometimes it really is just fatigue. You're mentally exhausted. You're I want to say fighting, but you're negotiating, right? And sometimes you get to the point where it's like, yeah, you can just take that. And it goes down even to at the time, I lost my Xbox and I played Call of Duty all the time.
Wait,
so
she wanted the Xbox. Was she a big
she,
gamer?
I wouldn't say a big gamer, but yeah, she had the Xbox. Oh
Okay,
man,
okay,
she could crush um, Guitar Hero. Man,
okay.
she was good at it.
I was
Well,
just
yeah, her
making
and I mean,
sure that it wasn't like
yeah,
she never played it, and then it was like, "Oh, yeah, I definitely want the Xbox." Like, just
yeah, it
like
wasn't
some
like
guy.
out of spite or anything, but yeah, because like when we were, I mean, when Guitar Hero and Rock Band were a thing, oh man, her and I would play that like all night long. We'd play until 2 in the morning. It was a blast.
Okay, so that's interesting that it was uncontested or, you didn't have
Mhm.
legal representation. Listing out the assets makes total sense. But during this process of like a year and a half, 2 years, what is like literally happening with your money? Like your bank accounts, like your
Yeah.
joint credit card. What is happening
Yep.
during that time?
Well, actually, what really happened was absolute panic. um, no, it was yeah, you're super anxious, right? I mean, when you start this process, everything goes through your head about, can I afford to live here? I mean, again, there was a period of a couple weeks where I'm like, okay, we need to sell the house and split the equity, right? I mean, that's you start going through all of these scenarios. Um, and then but yeah, so one of the first things that we did really is I pretty much we are in the camp that we combine all finances. So we had basically shared accounts for everything. We had a shared credit card, shared savings, and shared checking account. It was all shared. So the first thing I did, create brand new accounts. And so brand new bank accounts, brand new credit card. Um, and then, it was like, can I afford to be here on my own?
Mhm.
Can I afford to raise the kids? Can I afford you're questioning everything. And that's kind of what led to the story. You mentioned that I started blogging about it, and some of the first posts on heavy metal money were just what that thought process was going through divorce. Because in my situation, our entire time together for 15 plus years, I never paid a bill. Right. I mentioned this on the podcast with Andy Hill too at Marriage, Kids, and Money, was the fact that I never paid a bill. I just went to work. Everything just happened automatically. My wife at the time would pay all the bills. It just got done. And I never balanced a checkbook. I never did any of that stuff. So during that year and a half, I started the process. It started with, you know, pen and paper, but it was really going through and tracking spending. I really didn't even know like how to budget, like what a budget was. And so it started with pen and paper. I graduated to like doing spreadsheets, and it wasn't until after divorce where I finally like I learned that Mint was a thing and started linking my accounts and tracking spending that way. But it was very it was hard. There was some anxiety there. You're questioning everything. Um, and one thing to note too is that when it comes to splitting up the assets, and at least here in Minnesota, right, we're a no fault state, so it really doesn't matter. I mean, you could, let's say it was very contentious and you had, you actually had a PI following
Mhm.
your wife red handed, like you got photo evidence of an affair, right? Adultery, like no matter what, it doesn't matter. In Minnesota, it starts 50-50. Everything is 50-50. But one thing that isn't often talked about is it starts 50-50, but then anything and everything can be negotiated. So all of
Mm.
that stuff can be negotiated and basically signed off by the judge in the divorce decree. And that's what people may refer to after the divorce. Like, well, what's this? And again, that happened a lot for me. Like getting into real estate and investing after divorce. I can't tell you how many times that a lender, um, yeah, I had multiple lenders that they needed to see that decree. They needed to see how the assets were split and what was mine versus what was hers.
Hmm. Interesting. What about with alimony or child support? That is that like a formula, or is that something that is negotiated as well in a divorce decree?
Yeah, so it starts with a formula. So because, and again, that formula and the calculator that they have, um, they actually had like a series of worksheets how to determine what child support is,
Hmm.
and that was all through the judicial website that we went through, and it factors in a lot of different things. So not only how much we each make, but also how much time the children are with
Mhm.
each parent. Also, who holds the health insurance for each parent or each child, right? So this was interesting because according to the paperwork, and this is where it helped that my ex-wife and I, we were we were cordial to each other, right? We worked through things together, even though it wasn't exactly the way it was in the decree. For instance, child support for us was actually both ways. So according to it absolutely was. So because I held the insurance, they actually said that she had to pay me child support of X number of dollars a month. And then I had to pay her child support X number a month for like cost of living, right? Food, clothing, shelter, that whole thing. So really, she was supposed to pay me. I was supposed to pay her, and mine was more. But what I did was then, this seems ridiculous. Can I just pay you minus what you would owe me? And she's like, yeah, that's fine. Now we could have, again, so that's the thing. It depends on the relationship. There absolutely, after the divorce, you go through a process where you get the courts involved, and you could do wage garnishment. You could do, I mean, the other party pays child support, whatever method is defined and legally like decided upon. We actually, in all honesty, that piece was so complicated, right? Because then I would have to like, you actually do need to set it up. I mean, talk to your employer. You have wage garnishment coming out of your check, and it's a process. And so I just asked my ex-wife, "Hey, can I just pay you the amount I owe you and not go through this process?" She's like, "Yeah, I don't care." Right? So we were fortunate in that regard. Um, with regard to spousal support, I am relatively fortunate that she didn't ask for any. Now, there was. again, I've heard a lot of, I don't say horror stories. And again, that is a worksheet and a calculation that defines on, um, basically, again, how much is earned, but also the quality of life
Right.
um, that they had while you were together. Um, but again, fortunately, I didn't really have to go down that road, just because she didn't ask for any spousal support. Um, with regard to like splitting up some of the assets, we talked about some of the physical assets and furniture and stuff, but we then mentioned that it didn't get signed and finalized because it was going back and forth negotiation, and it was really kind of determining. I was keeping the home and the equity in the home.
Mhm.
And remember, it all starts 50-50. So typically, what they do is the court will look at all of those retirement accounts. Let's say you have IRAs and 401ks, right? They'd look at all of those, add them together, and split them in half. And then you can negotiate up or down, right?
Uh-huh. Yeah, that was what I was gonna ask because you mentioned equity, and I was wondering how she was, quote, unquote, "compensated" for that.
Yep, exactly. And so what we agreed on, and again, it did go back back and forth a little bit. What was agreed on is that I kept the home, and then she got one of my retirement accounts. It was about $90,000. So that retirement account, and not that I'm bitter, but let's just they they take all the retirement accounts from both parties, add them together, and split them in half. But I had all the retirement accounts, and she didn't have any.
Right.
So we took all of mine and split them in half. That's the only thing I'm going to say that may rub me a little bit. But anyway, let's move on. So the the and that was so basically, and the crazy part. This was the funniest part. So one of those retirement accounts was about 90 grand. That one, it was the one that got turned over. So again, we had the divorce decree that defined that you had to fill out specific forms with BMO Harris Bank, or what, I can't remember who held that one. And what was so crazy is that in the time it took for all of that stuff to kind of get transferred over to her, the account grew like $96. So I have an IRA out there with $96 in it, because they wouldn't, it was only the amount. Once the decree is signed, that's the dollar amount that gets transferred over. It's ridiculous. So
That's hilarious.
so I literally have, am I going to go through the process of rolling over an IRA for $96?
Well, it might have $97 in it now.
It might now, by now, yeah, you never know.
That's awesome and actually definitely really funny. Well, what happens to your credit score as this is all going on? Anything?
Yeah. Great question. So we had a relatively good credit score when we were together, right? We did have some debt, right? But we were really frugal. We understood that we really tried to pay that credit card off in full every month. Um, but my credit score did drop because, remember, I needed to open up all new things. So
Yeah.
I opened up new bank accounts. I opened up new credit card. And then I also needed to refinance. That was one big piece that I had to go through, because
Right.
I was going to stay here on my own.
Yep.
So now I had to pay the entire mortgage and utilities with one income.
Yep.
And so I immediately, again, I didn't know anything. I didn't know what I was doing. Right. But I then, they had to do a hard credit pull because I had to refinance. So all this stuff was taking place within weeks of each other. And so, yeah, my credit card did dip, but, or my credit score, I should say. But, in all seriousness, I never really paid that much attention. I mean, I know the value in it, and I know that you can, qualify for, lower rates, and I mean, all the benefits of having a higher credit score. Um, and I'm sure that there was some, I was penalized a little bit because I kept on doing all these different actions after the divorce.
Mhm. Yeah, that makes sense. Well, and I've heard stories, I'll call them horror stories, where, you have a joint credit card, it gets contentious, one spouse runs that up, you're both
Yeah.
responsible for that, but the other spouse is like, "I'm not paying for her crap," or whatever, and
Yep.
then their credit score takes a hit because of that. So, it's nice that you guys weren't contentious like that, and it doesn't sound like anything like that went kinda life just sort
No.
of went on for that year and a half, 2
Yep.
years. Yeah.
Well, and it's funny because there's a couple things that just kept on going for years. Like, for instance, we had one of the joint credit cards that we had, I think it was like Discover or something, and we used it religiously, right? I mean, we used Discover rewards for all sorts of things, like funding trips to frickin' Orlando. Right? But anyway, I remember it was funny because I started to get into real estate after the divorce, and I remember in 2017 I bought my first rental property. And of course, during that credit pull and during the diligence that the lender was doing, they came back and said, "Hey, well, we need to know what the balance is on this card." And I'm like, "Oh, well, that card should have been closed." Like, what? So I text my ex wife. I'm like, "Hey, you still have this card?" Yeah. And I'm like, "Well, they're gonna keep pulling me. My name is still on that." She's like, "Well, they won't let me just take my name off of it. They need to close the entire account so I can open up a new one." And I got tons of like automatics, stuff happening. Like, I don't want to just close that account right now. And I'm like, "Okay, but you know, I'm on that card, and every time they pull it, it's gonna come up." And she's like, "You shouldn't really have anything to worry about." And she sent me a screenshot of her 815 credit score. So I was like, "All right, I guess," but still, I don't want to be on the card.
That's
I think
funny.
it finally got taken care of, but it took a couple years after divorce.
I could see that. I could definitely see that. So looking back, Chris, as we're reflecting on this, and I really thank you for being so candid. Is
Yeah.
there anything looking back that you would do differently from it?
Oh man. It's really hard, and again, hindsight is always 2020, right?
Yep.
But I think that the biggest thing is, if someone is thinking about going through divorce, or they find themselves in that situation that they will be, it really is, number one, if you have children, like, number one, think about the kids, think about what's going to be, what's going to have as little disruption for the kids as you possibly can. I mean, there was supposed, again, in the decree, there was so many little things that we just let go. Like, for instance, there were like for instance, health insurance, right? I held the health insurance. The decree said that my ex-wife had to pay 40% of all, non-covered medical expenses. All right. Who's going to manage that?
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, it is tough. I tried researching, some divorcees would say that, "Oh, we got a separate card that we both would use for like children's expenses, school expenses," right? Um, and so really it was just kind of an honor system. Every now and then, if it was a pretty decent like purchase or something, like um, a kid's school project or something, or was it I can't remember some of them off the top of my head. I mean, my kids are like almost 23 and 20 now. So, but anyway, like, some of those things, it's like, am I gonna, you know, try to I don't want to say bother, but am I going to try to get that 1750 for that copay from my ex-wife the time I took the kid to the doctor? Like, but all those do add up, right?
Right. Right.
Um, so in all seriousness, a lot of them, I just paid it. I just let it go. Like, it would have been a lot harder to try to, you know, I mean, yeah, I could have, I guess, something that I would have done smoother is I would have taken better track. I would have, took track of all the kids' expenses, um, school expenses, medical stuff that I could have like maybe every quarter, right? Every 3 months, hey, this is what you owe. This is 60%, or, because I was supposed to pay 60%. This is 40% of the non-covered medical expenses. But, especially with healthcare, right? I mean, you get the statements months after what it happens. It was
Yeah, oh,
just
yeah.
really confusing to kind of keep track of that. So I was gonna say, if something would go smoother, I would have said definitely keep better records. That would be the number one thing. And then also just again, try not to disrupt the kids. I think we did a really good job on just we didn't we didn't use each other or the kids against each other.
Yep.
I never really talked ill about their mom when the kids were around, and I would expect her not to do that as well. So just be a good human. That's the thing.
So, do you believe in marriage anymore? Should young people get married? Would you consider it again? What do you think?
Man, I'm I'm a little jaded, so I know that for a while I was saying there is no way I'm going to get married again. But I've had a couple years to kind of cool down, right? Um, and so I've learned just to never say never, because you never know what is yet to come, right? You don't know what the future holds. No one has that crystal ball, right? I mean, I know that even when I was, um, late 30s going through divorce, and it's been a couple years and you first start dating for the first time, one of the big questions is, are you done having kids, right? Because I mean, again, professional women that are that age, or if you start dating, maybe there's somebody that's a few years younger than you that just haven't had kids yet,
Yeah.
whatever. That was a big question, right? Like, and I guess I've learned that you just never say never, because what happens if that is that special somebody and you're going to spend the rest of your life with them and they want you to be a father? Like, I guess I've learned that I'm just not ready to say never. But I've also had, I've been on a couple dates where they say that they're ready to have kids, and I've said, "Yeah, diapers and bottles. I think I'm kind of over that."
Yeah,
So
it's been 20 years. That would make sense to me and I think sounds
I think
reasonable.
the next diapers and bottles, probably my grandkids,
I
if and when that ever happens.
That makes sense to me.
So you know, I think, yes, I think marriage. I do believe in marriage. I think that there is something significant. Again, this is me, and I don't want to get all super mushy and stuff, right? But there's something significant on what the meaning of a wedding ring, right? And that coming together as one, I think, is just something that I take really seriously. And so I think if it were to happen again, I mean, it would be something that I, I I'd have to be serious about it. But I do believe in it. I really do.
Is there anything else you want to add before we wrap up, Chris?
Um, it's so funny because, like, when people talk about getting married, and I do wish them well, and then in the back of my head, I think, just wait 15 years. No, thank you so much for having me. Again, it's not always an easy topic to talk about. I mean, there were times after divorce where if I did start having this conversation, I mean, you know, there'd be waterworks, there'd be tears. It's a real thing, And I just wanted to tell you, Sue, I didn't really go through this. Um, I'll share this little story if I can. Um, so, doing the divorce online, after you are happy with the way it's defined, right? You've gone through it, you and your spouse. Okay, this is the actual. You submit it online, and a public attorney actually reviews it. At least this is how it is in the state of Minnesota. Public attorney reviews it, not for legal advice, but for completion and any, like, for instance, the feedback we got was defining, because I think I had parent A and parent B or something like that. And they were like, "Well, just define who is what parent. And then we had holidays, right? Because you had to go through and define the parenting schedule, right? So we did week on, week off. Every Sunday, the kids went back and forth. I mean, some are so freaking complicated. The 5221 schedule, blah, 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 blah. Like every Tuesday night and every other weekend. And it's a freaking nightmare. Like, what? Are you kidding me? Anyway, like, because I remember when my kids were small, the neighbors down the street, they got divorced. And it was so crazy because like they'd want to go play with their friends. And it was like, oh, they'd go over there. Oh, they're not home. They're with their dad or whatever. Like you never got the right schedule of when the kids are home. Like, I don't want that for my kids. We did it super simple 50-50 every Sunday. They swap houses. Done. Right. Anyway, so you go through like all this stuff, and the parenting schedule was super like you have to be very explicit. So, like, we had like the holidays, which holiday. So, we did like every other year. And so we had, I mean, for when the kids were young, so we had for 4 years or 5 years, we had a calendar on the fridge at both houses that had a list of the holidays. So at any given point, the children or an adult could look at it and say, well, the kids are with their mom this Easter. The kids are with their dad this Thanksgiving. And that really, really did help. So that's something that the public attorney just guided us on. Like we should make that a little more specific. And then any other special days. So like I added deer hunting. So the first 3 weekends of November, at the time, I was a deer hunter. I would go up to the cabin, and when the kids were starting at like 11 or 12, they would come with me and hang out in the woods. And I didn't force it on them or anything. It's something that they could try. If they didn't like it, they wouldn't have to go. But it was something that we added to the parenting schedule, which I never would have thought of before. So anyway, so we get through that piece. Then you actually print it out. You drive down to the courthouse and you pay $470 and you file it. That's the process. And then within it was super quick, like a week and a half. We then got, I don't know what they call it. I think, was it a summons? I don't know. I'm not a legal dude, but they sent both a letter with a court date, right? So now both of us then show up at the courthouse to go in front of the judge. Okay. And because we did all of this, due diligence up front, we went in front of the judge. It was about, I would say 12 minutes. Like it was super quick. And he was super cool. He cracked a couple jokes, but he looked over the filing. He said, basically confirmed that I am who I say I am. You are who you say you are. Just like kind of see in the movies, right? My ex-wife was standing on the right side of the room. I was standing on the left side of the room, and the judge is in the middle. And he kind of pages through it and says, well, it looks like you guys have already separated the assets. Is this like complete? And do you acknowledge that this is what you would like? Like, yes, Your Honor. And then he asked a couple more questions, just, logistics. And then what he did is he set the filing down on his desk. He leans back, takes his glasses off, and he says, now I want to talk about the kids. And he went into a 5-minute, I want to say speech, but he went into a 5-minute discussion on why we should be the best parents we should be for our children. And I will tell you, Lauren, I started crying. She started crying. We all started crying. We gave each other a big hug, and he slammed his gavel and we were divorced. And it was a crazy time. But anyway, so I just wanted to share that one last thing was, if you do go through the process, the people get most nervous about going to court and stuff. That was the most emotional piece that we went through. It was super short. But yeah, if I guess the one thing too is so many times you hear, we're staying together for the children. don't. That's just my opinion. Just don't. If you guys aren't meant to be together and to build a life together, it's not healthy for the kids.
No.
They're super resilient. Like you get divorced, they are gonna, it's not gonna affect them as badly as parents think it will. It really isn't. Will there be sad times? Yeah. Will they act out? Sure. Oh, that's not the way we do it at mom's house. You know what? Well, you're at dad's house today. That's the way we do it. Um, anyway, sorry. I went on a rant.
No, no, it was great. I think it was a great ad, and I like how you like, kinda put a bow on how that whole process went, because I was super curious, I'm sure everybody else was too. Well,
Yeah.
why don't you tell people how to get in touch with you?
Great. Yeah. Thanks, Lauren. So anyone can find me on Twitter. You can reach all my socials at heavymetal.money. I got some posts up there. My latest post up there, go check it out. It's how to invest during a recession. Kind of timely, right? And then again, I'm more active on Twitter. I have a new YouTube channel. I invite you to go check it out. My handle is at Heavy Metal Money.
Alright, and as always, I will put that in the show notes. I am at Adulting is Easy on Twitter. I have a YouTube channel as well at Adulting is Easy. I'm on Facebook. I'm on Instagram at Adulting is Easy Real. You can email me at realadultingiseasy@gmail.com. Thanks again for listening, everybody. Hopefully, Chris and I have made adulting a little easier for you.